I killed more seedlings than I care to admit. And it wasn't because I was bad at gardening, it wasn't because I didn't care, and it definitely wasn't because I didn't try. I bought all the supplies and I watched the videos. And somehow, things still kept going wrong. What I eventually realized is that nobody ever explained seed starting to me as a system. It was always steps and tips and hacks, but never the why behind any of it.
You weren't failing. You were missing context.
Exactly. And once that clicked, everything changed. So if you've ever started seeds, watched them sprout, got excited, and then slowly watched them struggle or die, this video is for you. Because everyone starts seeds wrong, and I did too. Most seed starting advice jumps straight into planting. But the truth is, most failures happen before you ever touch the soil. So instead of rushing ahead, I want to slow this down a little bit. We're going to walk through this the same way that it finally made sense to me. First, the information I didn't know I needed. Then, the materials I overcomplicated, and finally, the planting, which turned out to be the easiest part once everything else was right. And we're learning this together. No gatekeeping, no pretending this is obvious.
Just fewer dead plants.
This is the part I always skipped. I just wanted to grow things. I didn't want to research maps or zones or charts. It felt unnecessary. But the first real breakthrough I had was learning my hardiness zone. Finding it is easy. You Google your city and hardiness zone, or look up a hardiness map and find your general location. This was one of the things I personally kept re-Googling every single year, until I built a simple tool that finds it once and remembers it for you. If you want to use that tool, it's linked below. It's called SproutLog, but Googling it works just fine. What I didn't understand at first was why this matters. Hardiness zones are based on the average annual temperatures and often include the frost timing. They don't tell you everything, but they tell you what's possible. I'm in Southern Ontario, Canada, Zone 5B. That means plants that thrive in zones 1 through 5 generally do well for me. And plants that are meant for zone 8 struggle, no matter how badly I want them to work. At first, this felt a little bit limiting, but then something clicked.
Zones aren't rules, they're consequences.
Once I stopped fighting the environment, I stopped blaming myself. So once I understood my zone, things made more sense, at least on paper. But even when I picked the plants that should survive in my climate, some of them still struggle. And that's when I realized temperature wasn't the whole story. This was my next blind spot: light. Plants care about hours of direct sunlight, not how bright the space feels. Light requirements fall into 4 categories. You got full shade, which is less than 4 hours of direct sunlight. You have part shade, which is 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight, usually with morning sunlight. Then you have part sun, which is 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight with more harsh afternoon sun. And then you have full sun, which is 6+ hours. Once I started paying attention to this, gardening stopped feeling random. With 8 or more hours of light, my peppers and tomatoes thrive. With 5 hours, lettuce just explodes. Same garden, different outcome.
Temperature sets the limits. Light decides performance.
When I finally understood light, plant selection got a lot easier. Before this, I thought picking plants was about taste or aesthetics. And sure, grow what you like, grow what you want to eat, try new things. But my choices matched my zone and light. Plants stop feeling hard or easy, they just work. This applies everywhere. Backyards, patios, balconies. Once conditions are matched, success followed. At this point, I finally got confident in what I was growing, but I was still messing up when I grew it. Timing was the silent killer for me. I'd do everything right, just at the wrong moment. This used to be another place where I lost momentum. I'd bounce between seed packets, charts, websites like almanac.com, which are still great references. But instead of rechecking everything every season, I built a tool that combines the location and the plants you want to grow and the current season and turns that into a simple planting calendar you can follow and download for yourself. If you prefer using sites like almanac.com or seed packet charts, that's totally fine. The important thing is having your timing clear before you plant anything. Once you have that information locked in, the rest becomes much easier. That one step removed so much guesswork.
Right plant, wrong moment.
Once timing finally clicked, I expected things to feel easier. Instead, I hit a different wall because now I knew when to grow, but I had no idea what actually mattered when it came to supplies. Everything felt optional, everything felt expensive, and everyone online had a different must-have list.
Information without priorities creates noise.
Seeds felt like the obvious place to start. During spring, big box stores and grocery stores make it incredibly easy. Racks of colorful packets, huge variety, zero friction. And that's not a bad thing. Accessibility matters. But what I learned over time is that convenience often comes with trade-offs. Limited varieties, inconsistent germination, and little regional optimization. I tried seed saving and seed swapping too. Seed saving is powerful. It deserves its own video because it lets you repeat success year after year. Seed swaps with neighbors or Facebook groups surprised me the most. The seeds already survived in your climate. I even found swap events at local libraries, which I never would have expected. Local garden centers is another step up. Better quality, more relevant varieties, and fewer "why did this fail" moments. But what finally gave me control was buying seeds online. Reviews mattered, reputation mattered. It let me choose exactly what I wanted instead of settling for what was available. For me, that ended up being West Coast Seeds. I'm a brand ambassador, full transparency, but I was buying from them before that because the quality and the selection were consistently solid. All in all, online suppliers gives you the best variety and quality and lets you customize your garden, and honestly, now is a really good time to order.
Choice matters when conditions are specific.
Once I stopped blaming seeds, something uncomfortable became obvious. The problem wasn't what I planted, it was what I planted into. Soil is where I made some of my earliest and most frustrating mistakes. I used soil from my yard because it was free and easy. And I paid for it. Pests, mold, disease, all hitting seedlings at their most vulnerable stage of life. That's when I learned an important rule. Indoor seed starting is not the same as outdoor gardening. There are soilless options, but for this video, I'm sticking to the soil-based system. For seed starting, I kept running into three main options: potting soil, seed starting mix, and compost. Potting soil and seed starting mix are very similar. Seed starting mix usually costs more, and in my experience, the difference rarely justified the price. I personally always come back to a good quality potting mix. Compost alone never really worked out for me. Some people swear by it. If that's you, amazing, but it wasn't reliable in my setup. What really helped was understanding what mixes are made of. Cocoa coir or peat moss for moisture retention, perlite or vermiculite for airflow, and compost for the nutrients. Once I understood that, the mystery disappeared. That's also when I realized I can make my own mixes, cheaper, customizable, and actually know what my plants were experiencing. Let me know if you want a separate video on a DIY mix.
You stopped chasing labels and started understanding ingredients.
Once soils made sense, containers stopped being confusing. They stopped being a purchase decision and started being a function decision. I started with whatever I had around the house. Bowls, cups, random containers. They worked until they didn't. Drainage is a non-negotiable. Once I accepted that, DIY options became fun instead of frustrating. Pop cans, water bottles, milk jugs, milk cartons, yogurt cups, toilet paper rolls, the list goes on. Used nursery pots were a huge upgrade and basically free if you ask friends and family to save them for you. From there, I experimented with seed trays, seedling trays, shallow and deep root seed trays, and self-watering system. None of these were required. They were tools, and tools only matter when they match how you grow.
The best container is the one you understand.
At this point, I thought I was done buying things. I wasn't. Light humbled me. I don't have access to a sunny window. I grow in a basement. So I tried everything. Regular household lights, cheap Amazon Blurple LEDs, the red and blue ones. While they did work, they produced suboptimal results and they looked god-awful. I'm not one to suggest spending your hard-earned cash, but here I make the exception. If you need supplemental light, spending money on high-quality, full-spectrum LED grow lights is worth it. I've bought 2 so far, both around $200 to $300, and I've not regretted it for 1 second. The first grow light I bought was the Mars Hydro. It performs amazing. The only downfall is it isn't exactly nice to look at. The second is by Soltech Solutions. Soltech makes some of the best looking lights on the market in my opinion, but definitely comes with a premium price tag. The advantage is it looks good anywhere with superior performance and lots of options. Lastly, 3 optional upgrades dramatically improve your results. First, a germination or heat mat. It warms the soil to the ideal germination temperature, especially helpful in cooler spaces like basements. Second is a fan. Any old fan works, but I prefer the oscillating ones. It simulates outdoor wind and encourages stronger stems. Third is a timer. You can use it with the lights, the mats, the fans to automate everything and act as a fail-safe when life gets a little too busy. Nobody likes being left in the dark, your plants included.
Systems don't guarantee success. They reduce risk.
Once materials stopped fighting me, planting stopped feeling stressful. And that surprised me the most. Up to that point, planting always felt like a moment where you could ruin everything in seconds. Like one wrong move and the whole process was over. But something unexpected happened. Planting turned out to be the calmest part of the entire process.
That usually means the system is finally working.
Before I ever put soil into a container, I had to unlearn another habit. I reused containers all the time, but I didn't clean them. When seedlings failed, I blamed the seeds or the soil or the timing. I never considered what might already be living on the container itself. Simple, warm, soapy water is usually enough, but some people go as far as diluted bleach or vinegar soak, especially when reusing older pots. Once everything was clean and dry, it finally felt like I was starting from a known place instead of guessing. The next thing that changed everything was how I handled soil moisture. I used to plant seeds into dry soil and then water them afterwards. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and I never really knew why. What I learned is that watering is the catalyst for germination. It activates enzymes inside the seed itself. So instead of guessing, I started pre-moistening my soil. I'd grab a bucket or a boil, add some dry soil, and slowly mix in the water. Not until it was muddy, just moist enough to hold together when squeezed. Once I started here, germination stopped feeling random. When filling containers, I used to pack soil down tightly because I thought firmness meant stability. What it actually meant was restricted airflow. Now I fill gently, tapping the sides or the bottom of the container to settle the soil without compacting it. Roots need contact, but they also need oxygen. That balance mattered more than I realized at the time. Planting depths was another place I used to overthink things. Most seeds only need to be planted in about 1 centimeter, roughly half an inch deep. Some even less. Planting too deep was one of the quiet failures. The seed never emerged, so I assumed it never germinated. Now I check the seed packet every time. I gently press a small divot into the soil, drop in the seeds, and lightly cover them.
If a seed can't reach the surface, it never gets a chance.
I also stopped trusting one single seed. Not because seeds are bad, but because germination isn't guaranteed. At this stage, redundancy isn't waste, it's planning. Watering was one of the biggest breakthroughs for me. Top watering disturbed seeds, compacted soil, and created uneven moisture. Bottom watering changed everything. I placed my planted container into a tray or bowl of water and let the soil absorb what it needed from below. Once moisture reaches the surface, I remove the container. This creates moisture throughout the soil, encouraging the roots to grow downward. When seeds started emerging, I had to learn patience. Some sprouted quickly, others took their time. That wasn't the problem. The problem was how I reacted. I hovered, I adjusted, I interfered, and that usually made things worse. This is where consistency mattered more than intervention. Thinning was the hardest step emotionally. Cutting healthy seedlings felt wrong, but leaving them crowded caused slow, invisible failure. Once seedlings had some size, I chose the strongest one and cut the others at the soil level with scissors. No pulling, no root disturbance.
Crowding is a slow failure.
Airflow finally made sense here. Gentle movement strengthens stems, reducing mold and algae and discourages pets. I used a fan for a couple hours a day. If you don't have one, gently brush your hand over the top of the plants a few times a day. It kind of does the same thing. From there, my job became simple. Water consistently, watch for disease or legginess, and wait until the plant out dates I researched earlier. And that waiting felt different than it used to. It felt earned. And then there was the one last trap I didn't even know existed. Because once seedlings were finally strong and the plant out date finally arrived, I assumed I was basically done. I thought I could just take them from a warm, controlled little indoor world and drop them outside like, congrats, you live here now. That didn't go well. The first time I did it, the plants didn't die dramatically, they just gave up. Leaves got pale, edges got crispy, growth stalled, and I couldn't understand because technically I'd done everything right. But what I didn't realize is that seedlings aren't just adjusting to temperature, they're adjusting to real life. Indoor light is gentle. Indoor wind is basically non-existent. Indoor sun doesn't exist. It's just light. Outside is full force sunlight, wind, cold nights, and dryness. The seedlings feel that shock immediately. That's what hardening off is. It's not a gardening ritual, it's not a fancy trick, it's just giving your seedlings time to build tolerance before you ask them to survive the outdoors.
You're not moving them outside. You're training them for outside.
Exactly. Hardening off is basically a short transition phase where you introduce your plants to the outdoor conditions gradually. The simplest beginner version looks like this. For the first day, you put them outside for about an hour in a sheltered spot, ideally shade or with dappled light, and protected from the wind. Then bring them back inside. Next day, you do it again, but a little longer. Then a little longer again. Over about a week, sometimes up to 10 days, you slowly increase their time outside and slowly increase their exposure. More light, more air movement, more time, until eventually they're outside most of the day and they stop acting like it's an emergency. And two beginner mistakes to avoid, because I made them both. First, throwing them into direct sun on day one. That's how you get scorched leaves and instant regret. Second, forgetting that the wind is part of the process. Even a mild breeze can wreck a seedling that's been living indoors like a spa. So when you're starting, pick a calmer spot. And if it's super windy, skip that day or keep it short. Also, keep an eye on the moisture. Outside pots dry out faster than you think, especially in full sun and wind. Hardening off isn't complicated, it's just easy to skip when you're so excited. But once I started treating it as a part of the system, not an optional bonus step, transplanting stopped feeling like a gamble.
The goal isn't a perfect seedling. It's a seedling that can adapt.
And once I understood that, plant out day stopped being scary. Looking back, none of my seed starting failures were dramatic. They were small misunderstandings stacked together. We're gonna go into a deep dive on some of these topics, and you can click the video here on hardiness next to get more information. If you made it this far, you didn't just learn how to start seeds. You learned how to think about seed starting as a system. If you want help applying all of this to your own garden, grab my free tool in the description. It lets you create your own planting calendar specific to your location with the plants you want to grow. Plus a simple readiness checklist that ties everything here together.